Welcome to the ISM podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Matt, the director and founder of Polaris Outdoor, who are also one of our partners at ISN, who I also did a recent expedition with in Norway, which we'll come on to later. But yeah, great to have you on the podcast, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see you again, Max.
Cool. And I think it'd be a really good place to start would be just to introduce yourself. A bit about your background, and sort of where you've got to where you are today. And what inspired you to get into outdoor learning?
Yeah, good one. So, always been outdoorsy. That's a good start, isn't it? When your family or whoever take you outdoors as a young person. I grew up on the moors in Staffordshire Moorlands and the Peak District. But it kind of all started when I went to university in a big way. I did a degree in geology with mountain leadership, and that included getting your ML, which is your Mountain Leaders Award, through the BMC, which was really great training. I've always been into climbing and mountaineering, so that was a stage that kind of like took me to going abroad and doing high altitude mountains in the Himalayas and things like that. Fantastic enjoyment out of all that kind of stuff. And then with that came a few survival skills and some survival training as well. And that was mostly kind of built around the idea that as a geologist, people would be able to send me as a solo geologist out to remote areas and take samples or make a map or just do the geology thing by yourself instead of sending out this like entourage of lots of people and maybe logistics, which is more expensive. So that was a really good start. I spent a few years doing that and going to remote places and getting sick and almost dying and all sorts of things. So topped up a lot of my survival skills, which was really good. And then eventually it kind of led me actually towards education. So I ended up becoming a school teacher for a while, which was really, really great. And that kind of led me to training the students in what I did and taking them out to crazy places as well. And by the time we'd finished this in the education system, we had lots of personal development going on. We had students with mental health and different other difficulties that we were really seeing incredible results from in their kind of either rehabilitation or just enjoying life, or also their academic achievement was also increasing. That then even went into things like the prison system, and we were working with young offenders and all kinds of things in that area. So for me, when that happened, it became that became like the real passion of what I was doing, that this actually works in helping other people. I know it sounds cheesy, but I think that for most of us, once human beings find something that they love doing, that they see also helps their kind of fellow people around them, it can really spur you on and motivate you to kind of take it to the next level.
Amazing. And yeah, we had quite a few discussions, didn't we, in Norway about some of those tricky times you got yourself into when doing these expeditions. And yeah, maybe we'll touch on a few of those later on. But yeah, it's an amazing background and journey to where you've come today. And setting up Polaris Outdoor, what was the sort of the main impetus around that? Obviously, you've integrated some outdoor learning while you're a teacher. Is that correct? When you first started out, how did that natural progression go from becoming a teacher and then to sort of really honing in on outdoor learning?
I think it's just one of those things where when you discover something that has a lot of worth, and I'm not just talking about monetary worth. Well, I'm not talking about monetary worth at all, actually. But when you see something that has really high value, you can have a choice in life whether to kind of not break the norm and keep doing what you're doing, or the fire inside you can kind of spur you on to just take a chance and think, I really want to do that. That's something that not only inspires me, but it can inspire many other people. And I'll give you an example. One of our first projects when we were working with the school students in education, we took some kids to Borneo, and we diverted a stream in the middle of the jungle into a village where it was the main school that kind of was for the whole area. These kids were walking for 5 hours a day sometimes to come to school. So it was one school in the middle of the jungle, middle of nowhere, and they didn't have any fresh water. So we diverted a stream into the village, and then we put purification systems in place and storage facilities, and stored all this water. And it was an incredible success. And the village afterwards, the gratitude, love that was shown there was really cool. The students who were on that trip, this is more than 10 years ago. It's probably about 14 years ago now that this happened. And I still get students every now and then buzz me up on Facebook or whatever and say, "Oh, sir, that was so amazing. I remember that and it changed my life." And it was after we'd done a couple of those where I was kind of comparing what I was doing in the classroom on my daily job, getting the kids through their exams or whatever, and comparing that to what I was doing outside the classroom. And there was no comparison. And for me, it had to be that leap to then just kind of be, I've got to do this. This has to be something that works because of the value in it. And also, I didn't have to mark any school books after that either. So that was pretty good.
What is, I mean, taking students to Borneo from where were these students from? That sort of first trip, one of the first trips you did?
They were South London.
South London. Okay. Wow. And so that must have been, how many students were on that trip? Was it a large group or?
It was 15 of them, yeah, to start off with.
All right. And how did they transition to becoming, or how did you prepare them to sort of go into such a remote environment for them? I mean, maybe some of them had never even left the UK or Europe, but that must have been quite a shock for them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it wasn't for these, because this group had just spent 3 years in training with me. So one of the really cool things that happened with Polaris, or the development of it, is that the whole program was tried and tested inside the school system. And so, when it fits into key case studies for different subjects, or to pastoral care, or to whatever that a school can put out, attaching the outdoor education system or growing it inside a school was absolute dynamite to kind of having a recipe for success. So these students, before they went to Borneo, they did a survival training course with us, and then they'd go on a smaller expedition. One was a sea kayaking expedition around the coast of Cornwall, which is on our website. And then they'd come back and do a second training course, which would build on the first. And then we'd take them to the Arctic, and they'd do a cold weather, minus 25, minus 30 degrees, which is something that you and I have been on together. They'll do that, and then they'll come back and do a jungle training course, and then we'll take them to Borneo. So by the time we were taking them to kind of the more technically, and also kind of like when it comes to keeping yourself healthy, jungles are one of the hardest places to do that in, because you could have whatever germs on your fingers and you just touch your eyes or your mouth, and you're gonna get sick. You get dysentery. You can be in really big trouble if you're not being sanitary and looking after yourself properly. So there's a huge amount of discipline that goes into running a trip like that successfully, especially when you're not doing anything touristy, when it's completely off grid, when it's completely out in the remote, which is what we were doing with these students. The risk assessments for these were massive, but By the time you get to this point, the students are doing their own risk assessments because they know how to do them and they know how to operate safely and really effectively. So the last example with that is we dumped those students after they did that water project. We dumped them on a deserted tropical island because the chief of that village owned an island off the coast and he let us use it. And we dumped the kids there for 5 days and they were trapping and hunting and fishing, building housing, lighting fires, looking after sanitation. It was an unbelievable experience. In the end, we even we built rafts and we escaped the island, kind of like Castaway style, like Tom Hanks did, and that was a really cool activity and just a brilliant end to the whole trip.
Amazing. And obviously, aside from the physical challenge of taking students, kids on these kind of adventures, what's the sort of the wider benefits that you want to instill in them? Because I mean, yeah, like we touched on the Norway trip, which we'll go into a bit later, or even the part 2 session. It was a very holistic, it was a really, really fascinating experience to see, even for myself to sort of think about, personal development and how you can think about, how you are you resilient? When you think you've, maxed out your energy or whatever, you're probably only half, your tank is only half full. So you've got all these skills that you can tap into that don't necessarily come to light in normal everyday situations. So what is it about these expeditions that makes it special for students?
I think one, you're definitely taking them out of their comfort zone. In a school within reason. I mean, me, for example, at school, I was a very average student. I wasn't gifted. I wasn't in the bottom groups, but I was somewhere in the middle, and I never really put a lot of effort into school. I did enjoy it, but I enjoyed it because of my friendship groups. I didn't enjoy it because of any particular subject I was, really passionate or kind of like, in love with, if you like. And and anybody can do that in school. A lot of people, when you say something like that, a lot of people can relate to the fact, like, yeah, I went to school and it was okay. Whereas in the environment we're working in, we can take a student and we can force them completely out of their comfort zone and say, right, we're going to give you some skills and we want you to believe in yourself once you've got these skills, and then operate outside of your comfort zone. And that can be completely and utterly changing to a young person, especially a young person who maybe is, on the average or below average academically. Academically strong young people, they really stand out to you and I both know that that they have the ability to do that, but it's easy to drift under the radar. So these students, they gain a much higher power in competence, confidence, the ability to thrive on change and complexity, the ability to achieve more with less, and the tenacity and the growth that comes out of that is kind of like almost taking a booster to what you would have in a normal academic situation. You're really pushing and accelerating their personal attributes to a higher level much more quickly. And part of it's because of the resistance and the difficulty that you're actually putting them through. Not that, it's not, that may sound torturous. That's not the intention, but what you want all young people to understand is that if you can thrive in complex environments and you have to use multiple skills simultaneously, you become a very powerful individual, and that power allows you to be confident, but it also allows you to grow your personal happiness as well. Because when you're confident in different environments, the stress levels are lower, your enjoyment is higher, and so therefore, as an individual, you become a happier person. And what we actually in the school was we were comparing the students on the outdoor program to students of similar academic ability who were not on any outdoor program, and we were noticing vast improvements, up to 30% higher academic achievement over a number of 2 to 3 years, because of the connection that they made between personal enjoyment on these trips and activities to their unity with the school itself and the school environment and the education environment. So students became more self-connected and self-confident about being in the corridors. The kids after the Borneo trip, I'd pass them in the corridor, and you'd get a look off the student like, yes, like we did that. And it never went away. Those students went from year 10 to 11, 12, 13, all the way through their school life. There were those moments of, we did that, and that was awesome. Just like I said, they still contact me today, and we still have a good talk about those kinds of things. So the value is, it's not just incredible, it's actually measurable. And I love that. As a teacher, I really dig that. It's very cool stuff.
It's going to be one of my next questions, actually. But just before we move on to that, it'd be great to hear maybe a bit about some of the. I mean, it all sounds absolutely unbelievable, but it must come with it huge challenges as well. Have there been any particular challenges that you've come across that you've that have been particularly difficult, or anything that stands out from these expeditions that you've been taking for many years now?
I mean, I think there's always the safety side of everything, which you need to. It's really important that you get that right. And I think at first, one thing that when I first started doing these kinds of things, I really took on my own shoulders the entire safety aspect of this. Where I'd go and recce the sites we were going to. I'd do the full risk assessment. But as the students became super competent at what they were doing, I would include them in the risk assessment as well. So I'd be like, well, what do you guys think of this? And instead of having one head just kind of like trying to work something out, you've now got 10 or 15 heads all working together. So safety is always key. But if you look at the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme, they have their risk assessment stuff. And there's a nice quote that I always remembered from that, which was, our intention is to not eliminate all risk. And I think that's really important, that we as growing individuals in an ever-changing world, today's world is far more complex than it's ever been in probably history. You don't want to eliminate risk. You want to have a suitable amount of risk that you can then learn to deal with. And that's where a lot of the growth comes from. And I think the balance of that is the difficult thing to get right. Because you don't want to jump off a boat onto a beach and be surrounded by 15 crocodiles. But at the same time, if you know how to deal with a crocodile, in an appropriate way in the wild, then that could be a risk that you could actually manage. So that risk level is it's always a really interesting subject to talk about. And of course, then when you're on an expedition, you don't know really, or you can't control all aspects of it. And I'll give you a great example, actually. So the story relating to this actually is that when we were coming off our deserted tropical island, we had a big boat waiting out for us on the water, and we were in a smaller motorboat that went out to it from the shallows. And as soon as the small boat got out of the bay, it tipped over, and 7 or 8 kids ended up in the water.
How deep was it? Was this deep water, or what was the?
It was probably about 10 meters deep. So,
okay. So they had to swim.
Yeah, it's plenty deep. and they had to swim to the main boat, and they got on the main boat. But the issue was our small motorboat had now gone to the bottom because it sank, and half the team, including myself, was still on the island. And I'm kind of like looking through my binoculars at all these kids in the water, thinking, "Oh no," you know. And it was quite it was quite an interesting situation. And the kids were all, they had the appropriate PPE on, and everything was absolutely fine. But the boat was at the bottom. Anyway, within a short amount of time, some Bajau fishermen went past in their boat, and our Bornean guides, of course, they're local and they speak the language. They asked them if they could help, and it was an incredible scene to watch these Bajau dive down with empty plastic bottles, and they had a water they had an air pump boat. So these Bajau, they had these bottles, and they filled them with air at the bottom. Like, they swam down to the very bottom, filled them with air, tied them to our motorboat. The Bajau raised our boat from the bottom, and with these incredible skills, and it was an amazing thing to watch. The take back from that experience was quite interesting, because the students, they learn a really powerful lesson that day, that even if things go what seemed at the moment really quite badly wrong, there was always a way to solve the problem. And we had great conversations about it afterwards. And then we related that, not only a verbal kind of situation, but we related to that what happened that day to what they could do in their own lives to start to change their situations at home or at school, how they could take advantage of the environment around them and implement different things to kind of make sure that they could then cope with any out of the blue challenges that would then come their way. And there was a great deal of learning from that experience. I mean, I learned tons just watching that happen. But when you then start to really kind of mull it over and relate that to your own personal development as an individual, it really makes you ask you some deep personal questions about who you are and where you're going and where you want to be and how are you going to get there.
And how does it, how do you measure success on a trip? So you've got 15 kids taken to Borneo, have this incredible experience, and how, obviously, on the trip to Norway, we had like a really interesting personal development pack that they all had to fill out. So how has that evolved? How has that process of seeing how the impact of these trips has had on these kids evolved over the time that you've been doing these trips?
Yeah, good question. And that kind of like that leads directly off what I just said. We would sit around a campfire in the middle of the jungle, and we'd talk about goal setting, or we talk about change. And I think, to begin with, when I was a teacher, I wasn't really that worried about measuring that change in a very kind of physical way. But later on, I was like, we should all write about this. And to start off with, it just started with journaling. It just started with diary entries. And I would give the students just a standard blank notebook and a pen, a waterproof one, which was really cool. And they would just write a journal or a story about the truth of what happened to them in the jungle, and then it started to kind of get more in depth, and there was kind of like projection towards the future, and what kind of a person you'd want to be. So in the end, we ended up with this, which is a personal development book that we now use, and we've got different personal development books for different experiences that we provide, and that includes service, so they have to help one another on different teams. It includes reflecting on your day. It includes anecdotal stuff just to get them to think about things outside of the box relating to what they're doing at that day or that moment. And then doing lots of kind of self-assessment, and then towards the end of their experience, whether it's a week away or whatever, they start goal setting. So they don't do it straight away because you want them to enjoy and immerse and just kind of experience the incredible place they're in. But after a while, we say, right, you've discovered that you're not very good at this. What are you going to do about it? And they start setting goals. And we've had incredible feedback from families saying, my little Johnny, he keeps his room perfectly tidy and he does the washing up. I mean, they don't turn into like saints overnight, but we do get really strong feedback from families about the self-discipline that improves. And also in today's world, we get a lot of my kid is they've got a hobby and they're not doing so much screen time. And I really like that side of it as well, that the waste of time that you can just spend scrolling on screens. I know that you and I have talked about this when we were on the trip, and it's got massive value to recognize that problem that we have in society, the addiction to screen time, kind of pointless screen time, which a lot of it can be. And then the benefit of instead being alert to your surroundings, whether that is in the jungle or whether it's just on your own street. It doesn't matter, but that alertness and that kind of like cognitive processing that happens of just looking up and asking questions about an environment that you're in.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's scary how many, hundreds of hours you seem to waste, or technically you do waste in a year by just mindlessly scrolling. And if that energy was put, even half of that energy was put elsewhere or was put into doing something productive, then the learning gap could be much slimmer as well, couldn't it, for students? But yeah, it's a fascinating topic. And my final question for this part one discussion is: are there any students that really stick out for you that have made a really quite significant impact? I know what you mentioned a couple of students that have come back to you and said, I'd like to work with you. I got it so inspired. I'd like to be a part of the kind of experience that you create for students. Is there any students that really stand out for you?
Yeah, well, funny enough, actually, if you go on our website and you look at our staff team, one of our staff is called Shane. And Shane was my student in geography, and I taught him from year 7 all the way to year 11. And Shane was very much a me when I look at him in the classroom. Very average student, kind of kept his head down at school, had a couple of friends, but wasn't popular, had a bit of an awkwardness about him. Shane went on to be one of the youngest qualified survival experts in the UK on the hardest and top qualification for outdoor survival and bushcraft skills. And he's now a 24-year-old self-employed bushcraft expert. He is absolutely brilliant. And it's not just the fact that he's gained a lot of knowledge on in that kind of subject area and that he's good at it, and he is very knowledgeable and he is very good at it. Yeah, Shane has also become an outstanding teacher as well, and that's why we then hired him back again afterwards. And one of the really cool things about this company is that we get a lot of students who come to us for work experience, and then if they're serious about this kind of new world that they've discovered, this new opportunity, they'll say, I want to do. And I'll say, okay, what's your specialism? And then I'll give them some ideas, and I'll say, go to South Africa for a year, go to the USA for a year, go get some training, go get some experience, and then come back, and we'll then give you more experience and training. And then if you're good enough, you can rub shoulders with world-class practitioners. And Shane is the proof of the pudding, because from year 7 to a 24-year-old young man, so 10, 11, 12 years of his life, he immersed himself in a new opportunity and a new passion, and with his hard work and his determination, he's truly reaped the rewards of that. He's a self-employed, super strong individual in many, many different ways. And I mean, that's what we get our kicks out of, as teachers, seeing young people turn into brilliant individuals. And he's definitely the proof of the pudding with that.
And I imagine, that learning is going to translate to other subjects as well. It's not just going to impact their sort of confidence, but that instilling of empowerment and strength and all that sort of thing can help right the way across all the different subjects within the curriculum, right?
Yeah, you're right. It really does. And I think that outdoor education in that way, it develops the person as a whole, and not just kind of subject by subject in the school setting. And again, we've had many students who have now who are kind of maturing and say we want to work with Polaris, and we like a career in this, and we take them on for work experience. We train them up to be good, and not just good practitioners, but to be good teachers. And that's kind of one of the key things for us. We've had lots of really good bushcrafters want to work with us, but just because you're good at bushcraft doesn't mean that you can necessarily download that into somebody else and give them not just the knowledge, but also the passion as well. And that's what a good teacher can do. A good teacher can inspire that learning to be kind of perpetuated going forwards. And Shane and some of the other young people who were kind of homegrown within the company, then they're growing that teaching and learning ability, so that they're good with people. They're confident speakers in public. They hold themselves in a way that people look at them and think, I want to know that person a little bit. They've got a confidence about them. It's not a loud confidence. It's just a kind of they stand up tall and they look you in the eye. And a lot of their peers surrounding them, especially when they were younger, they'd have trouble doing that. But after you've had a few really crazy outdoor experiences in different places, I can cope with this. I can operate in the world, and I can do it successfully with a smile on my face.
And I imagine it's also very impactful because you also run these courses for teachers and leadership teams as well, don't you? Not only students. So I can imagine that's quite an empowering, interesting experience, taking a group of teachers and senior leaders on these trips too.
Yeah, that's right. Some of us in the company, we've done teacher training for teachers in schools, and so we often take teachers out and do fun activities which teach them a really valuable skill, but also relate it to their teaching practice. And things like, are you noticing this type of student, or what kind of bad habits do you have in the classroom that you could maybe get rid of, and just refining your teaching practice so that you're a more effective teacher on a daily basis.
Fantastic. No, I think what Polaris do and what you've built is incredible, and especially personally as well. I found, obviously, we'll touch on the Norway trip in much more detail in the second part of the chat. But I just found it super inspiring, getting completely out of my comfort zone. I was one of those students that was pretty average, kept my head down, and I think if I'd have had this opportunity when I was a kid or a young teenager, it could have accelerated that growth, because that's where I found when I grew, when I pushed myself out of my comfort zone after graduating in the real world of work. But that could probably have been expedited, I suppose, at a younger age. But yeah, no, that's incredible. Thanks for joining us for the first chat, Matt. And we're really looking forward to the second parts when we can dive into the Norway expedition in much more depth.
Yeah, thanks, Max. Good to see you again.